Hello, everybody, and welcome to, a special episode of Merlin Reviews. And today I'm going to be talking about a recent movie theater experience I had seeing the animated adaptation of The Killing Joke from Warner Brothers and the people behind the DC animated universe, some of the most awesome people ever, in my opinion, bringing The Killing Joke to life. And, I went in a special Fathom event thing they were holding there, and I decided, it's Killing Joke, it's Batman, it's the Joker. I have to go see it if I have the time, and so I did. Alright. Well, I guess I'll just dive right into the review then. Well, first off, I'll say that this movie isn't really The Killing Joke. It's like half of The Killing Joke. And the first half is just sort of a decent part of a Batgirl movie, and it kind of just goes a little more into her struggles of towards the end of her career. She's having a hard time really adapting being Batgirl, and she's having a hard time crossing that line, and Batman's trying to coach her, but I guess sees that it's kind of difficult. And then the second half is just The Killing Joke from the comic, pretty much panel for panel copied verbatim. So that's The Killing Joke. And I guess I'll start off with some things I thought that were positive. The voice acting was great. I mean, I guess that doesn't even need to be said. There was even a little brief documentary where Mark Hamill talked a little bit about his experiences playing the Joker and how really a lot of people think he's the definitive Joker, and he kind of is. He's made that role his own, and he is fantastic. I mean, anybody that knows anything about cartoons or animation or Batman pretty much will agree, that Mark Hamill is the best when you consider the context of the medium. So that just needs to be said. Kevin Conroy is also back as Batman, the Batman. Fantastic Kevin Conroy. Great person. I've actually met him. And, they do a great job. These people could do these roles in their sleep. They have great chemistry together. But they're not playing the Batman, the animated series versions of Joker and Batman. They are playing Alan Moore's creations from the Killing Joke comic, which, interestingly enough, was supposed to be kind of a standalone story exploring the Joker more and his relationship to Batman, and one of the first ones to really dive deep into the complexities of their relationship. And it wasn't meant to be considered a full universe, which is why it's heavily implied that at the end of the comic, Batman kills the Joker. Now, this isn't really a spoiler, because it's not even defined if it did happen, but it's pretty heavily implied, and that's kind of a review for The Killing Joke as a whole that we could get into later. But in terms of that, though, the importance of The Killing Joke is that even though it was originally written to be kind of a one-off story, it is entirely canon, with the exception of, I guess, the ambiguous ending, because this origin, which goes into the backstory of the Joker, is generally considered to be, for most people, what his basic origin in the comics is. And granted, yes, the Joker states it might not be true, and a lot of people think that there are some other possible ones, but in terms of the general consensus, because this is like the most definitive look at it, that people all seem to pretty much enjoy, and it seems like it fits so well with the Joker's character that it's commonly accepted as his origin story, more or less. And I'm fine with it either way. I think that whether or not he's ambiguous or not, I think it makes him a little more scary when you don't know the past, and of course you could be lying. And yes, you do look at the Joker in a sympathetic light, which, as hard as it is for some people to stomach, and as hard as it is to wrap your head around, it does add a whole different layer and perspective to the character. However, once again, more about The Killing Joke in general and the ramifications rather than the film. Now, in addition to the voice acting, I thought the direction was great. Once again, Brian Azzarello, who is a veteran comic book writer who I've also enjoyed a lot of his stuff too. He's written a couple of my favorite Batman stories. He basically transfers the Alan Moore stuff perfectly and does pretty well adding his own stuff, basically fleshing out Batgirl's story at the beginning of the movie. And in addition to that, the direction was very good as well. I guess that goes to say, with the people behind these things that know these characters in and out, the direction keeps the movie moving pretty fast. It never feels boring. You feel engaged with every shot, with every panel, with every line of animation. There's always something going on. You're pretty invested. And for the part that is purely the Killing Joke stuff, it works as a very good adaptation. A very good adaptation. It's kind of similar to Alan Moore's other work, Watchmen, where you have to wonder, is it too good of an adaptation? Because upon seeing much of the Killing Joke stuff, minus the stuff that was added in around it and before it, you realize that there might not necessarily have been enough there for a feature-length movie, because The Killing Joke is a relatively short story. It's a fairly quick comic, and it certainly feels like that when you get to the Killing Joke stuff in the movie. It feels like you could just begin there. Like in the comic, it basically begins with that interview in the prison, and then Barbara Gordon is shot. Then we're off and running. In that sense, though, I think adapting the center of the comic and the main themes and ideas of the comic and how well it's portrayed, I can't argue that that was done well. It was done very well. And it did add some chills, and it made me feel disturbed. And I'll get into that when I wrap it up. But I guess that's where I say the positives end for me. First of all, in terms of adding things in, I understand doing that if you want to expand the story. However, if you're going to add in these different character elements and plot elements, how about actually explore them and help them come to true fruition? Don't just kind of put them in there to plot it along to pad things out, because for the most part, that's what it felt like it kind of was. And I don't mean that necessarily in the worst way, but for the first half hour of this movie, I was thinking, did I come in to see The Killing Joke or some kind of okay Batgirl movie? And don't get me wrong, I like the Barbara Gordon character a lot. I really do. I've always liked Batgirl. And I thought she was portrayed well in this movie. She was acted well. She was drawn well. You got a good sense of her character going through a great deal. She felt like a real person. And honestly, other than the Joker, I feel like she was the only person that felt like a fleshed out character in this movie. And yes, that kind of goes for Batman, who, I mean, other than the fact that we do know he is Batman, I guess you could argue we kind of take things just as they are. And he doesn't really do too much in this when you think about it. Just says some things and does some stuff, and it's bare bones, but it works. That is kind of the way it was in the comic. It really is much more of a Joker story anyway. But we'll get into the more specifics of the Batgirl stuff, which I'm sure people really want to hear about, towards the end. Now, one thing that really kind of disappointed me with this movie from a technical aspect, the animation was pretty lackluster for a feature film. Now, I'm not saying that it's terrible. It's not bad. I mean, these guys have really done very little animation I've ever thought of as being bad. It's decent. It's good. It's, passable. More than passable. At points it looks great. But for the most part, it's just kind of okay. We've seen them do better things. We've seen them do better pieces of animation. And if you're going to do a feature film like this, especially with the Killing Joke legacy, the impact in the comic book industry and Batman stories, and the fact that it's going to be R-rated for the first time, and the fact that the DC Animated Universe, really pushed the boundary for what can be shown on television and bringing some of the darker, grittier, more mature aspects of comic book storytelling to a wider audience, and for them to instead of alluding to it, finally actually just do it full force and show everything. You'd think that the presentation would be more like a feature film, more of an epic scale, or at least more detailed. But the truth of the matter is, most of it was just okay, and some of it wasn't. I know I'm not the biggest fan of CGI colliding with traditional animation, but there was a lot of CGI in this animated movie. The city, the cars, some of the background stuff, and a lot of it was just unnecessary, and it didn't blend very well. And it kind of made the movements of the characters seem rather choppy. And sometimes they were choppy. Honestly, there were times where I felt like I was watching a cheap anime, where there was particularly one scene when they were showing the Joker's origin, where he's supposed to be kind of confessing to his wife that he feels like a loser and he's losing it, and he raises his arms up to shake angrily, and they literally just do the exact same motion twice. And it's not sped up or anything. It's very obvious. It's not the greatest animation. It just looks, it looks kind of bad, and I was like, that's weak, guys. I mean, where was the money spent here, Where was the money spent? So the animation, wasn't that great. If you look at Mask of the Phantasm, that movie is beautiful. And it took things to a bigger limit. It felt like a bigger story. It had, they'd only used the CGI for the background stuff, and it just put a lot more detail into all the different images and the movements. It used slow motion at points, and of course, it had a bigger story, and it had the bigger orchestra incorporating the Batman animated series theme. It just presented an actual full-length feature film, And even some of their newer stuff, like Under the Red Hood, honestly, more detailed animation and, quite frankly, a significantly better movie about the Joker and Batman, with similar consequences. And I mean, that was just released for direct-to-DVD years ago, and that looks better than this movie. This is supposed to be like the creme de la creme, and it doesn't look like it. That was disappointing. And that's just the animation. Okay? Like, I was trying not... you guys know that, obviously, I'm not, the most hardcore animation person. I mean, honestly, I like anime, and let's be honest, they cut a lot of corners in anime, and I like a lot of older anime. For me, if the animation looks decent, I can let it pass. But I hold these guys to a higher standard, and of course, I care the most about the story. And we'll get more into that. Another thing, too, going along with the presentation, why was this rated R? Other than to be a publicity stunt. Yeah, and I'm really not trying to be mad, because I really like these people. But you could tell that somebody was not used to the idea of doing an R-rated thing. And you'd think that for guys that have bounced around it and have kind of practically wanted to make more adult stories anyway, and really have, with outwardly going too exploitative with the violence and everything, would actually love the opportunity to do it with this. And maybe they felt like they didn't want to go too far, but I felt like they didn't do anything different. I mean, first of all, it wasn't much more violent than any other DCAU Batman-related thing I've seen. I didn't really see that much more blood, or anything like that. It wasn't really that violent overall in terms of actual physical fighting. So that was kind of disappointing. And the most disturbing stuff, when they show Gordon going insane when the Joker's showing him pictures of what happened to his daughter and the mutilation and her being naked and violated and bloody, they kind of still dance around it. And I mean, I know it sounds weird that I want to be horrified more, because I do think the movie conveys a pretty good atmosphere to get that point across. I still feel like if you're gonna do this, do it. The comic just evoked such horrific feelings when you're reading it, and they get some of that right, but you feel like they're just holding back the whole time. And another thing too, this is an R-rated animated Batman movie. It's the first R-rated Batman movie ever. Why doesn't anybody curse? And I know it's funny. I don't really, care for bad language. I don't think it's always necessary. But you have an R-rated Batman movie, and I'm sorry, I don't like to curse that much for these things, but they don't use the word fuck. Okay, they have scenes, several scenes, two I can think of at least, where mobsters are cursing, okay, in appropriate scenes where mobsters would curse about stuff, and they say frig. When I heard that, I'm like, look, if this were any other thing, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care at all. I would forget about that line completely. I know what it means. I can infer that. We all can. We've all seen our fair share of gangster movies, Goodfellas and Scorsese movies and Quentin Tarantino movies. We know that gangsters curse sometimes, right? At least in the media, probably in real life. They say fuck. That why wouldn't the guy who's threatening his nephew, Paris Franz, which is kind of a funny thing, by the way, for stealing his money and for being a failure, actually curse in this R-rated movie? I mean, what was the point of rating it R? There is nothing R-rated about this movie by animation standards. Like, PG-13, okay. But they don't really show us anything. It really, come on. Really? For mature themes, I guess? It's not much worse than some of the stuff we saw back in the animated series. Seriously, it really isn't. Heck, I could argue that Mask of the Phantasm and heck, Red Hood was about as dark. That was frustrating. Whew. Alright, but getting into the stuff that I guess people would want to hear about the most. First of all, the first part of the movie is Batgirl's story, essentially, and that's fine. But as I mentioned before with not following through with things, if you're going to add all this on to build up her character to make us care about her more, even though most people that go to see this know who Barbara is and have read the comic before, and even if you haven't, you get a general sense of how bad it is. But I can understand expanding on it and wanting to get the audience that may not know to care about her more. But they only kind of half do it. You feel like there could have been a good 10, 15, 20 minutes added on to really flesh out her development, because it just kind of, ends, I guess, abruptly when the Joker shoots her. But I'm sorry, like, they have this whole rivalry she has with this young mobster guy who outdoes her and kind of objectifies her and becomes a sexual threat to her that causes Batman to be afraid. And I can tell what they're doing. They're trying to foreshadow what's going to happen with the Joker. But this character, once he's gone, disappears. Okay, and he's basically elevated to being Batgirl's major nemesis for the first part of this movie, and I'm thinking, is that the Joker? Are they going to make that the Joker? But no, if they're doing the Killing Joke, they got to do his actual backstory from the comic. Why? Who is this character? He's acting kind of like the Joker. I mean, I know this is supposed to be some parallel thing, but then this guy goes away. The whole first part of the movie goes away, and there isn't any kind of like final scene, really, really wrapping up the Batgirl stuff. I mean, yes, we know she becomes Oracle, but it just feels like that whole part of the movie could have had a couple scenes to flesh some things out. It was rather unfortunate. It was rather unfortunate indeed. But, alright. Let's get to the thing which I don't know this for sure, but I suspect might be the most controversial thing, which might have caused some people to feel disturbed. I mean, if you know what the Killing Joke is, and you went in and felt disturbed and felt bad about that, come on, you know what you're getting into. Come on. But they added something to make Batman feel more hatred, to push himself to the edge, to actually commit the act of killing the Joker in this movie beyond just, once again, severely hurting one of his closest family members, essentially. His family. Really. She's like a surrogate daughter to him. And kidnapping Commissioner Gordon. They decide to blatantly say that Batgirl and Batman had a relationship. And not really a full-fledged romantic relationship, but more like she just kind of admired him, and, they literally just kind of had sex, and they do kind of try to say that Batman just, wanted to distance himself from her because he didn't want her to get hurt so that his life could be easier, which is fine. Batman tries to push aside personal relationships all the time. That's how I prefer my Batman, cold and distant, personally. But they make Batman come off kind of like a brooding asshole, in the way it was handled. And because we don't really get to once again see much more interaction, it feels like it just kind of is this thrown in sexual thing. And this is going to be another one of those conflicted things, because much like the violence in the movie and the disturbing nature and the themes and the Joker's dialogues, it can be a very unpleasant story, and it is an unpleasant film on purpose. So you have to wonder how much more of the imagery do you want to see if it's rated R. So maybe I can understand some of the issues with the execution. But once again, this is going to sound really funny to say, that sex scene happens off screen. Okay, once again, no nudity, really. Okay, and I know I'm not expecting porn. I'm not expecting any kind of, horrible nerd fantasy here, but they can give us a couple seconds of some passion on the rooftop, show some skin. It's an R-rated Batman movie, and it just makes it seem like it's this fling. It's just this random thing they throw in, and they don't expand on it, which makes, it doesn't really add anything. If she had gotten shot and they hadn't done that, they hadn't pursued their relationship like that, it wouldn't have really, it would have added more if they had spent more time with it, but it just seems like this random thing. And, okay, once again, we have to get more into it, because I'm sure that this caused a lot of debate among comic book fans, because this is something that has been somewhat implied in some stories, and it's never really been outright stated, though, to my knowledge. So it's probably the boldest thing. But this is the thing, okay? The reason why I didn't just go into full all-on nerd rage was because I know the people that did this movie worked on the DC animated universe and have worked on Batman for decades and have their own universe. In the DC animated universe, things are their own way, obviously. And in that universe, in Batman Beyond, with the older Barbara Gordon, it is implied that she and Batman may have had a relationship, or at least that she was interested in him at some time. It was literally, there was an exchange a couple times. Something did happen there. But technically, that is a completely different universe. It's not within the main DC comic canon. In that, they were always apprentice teacher, friends, surrogate father-daughter, fine. And that's the way I've always looked at it. I mean, Barbara and Batman having some kind of romantic relationship over time is not something that I think is impossible. That doesn't make any sense, and I'm okay with it. But it's not what I prefer. I've always envisioned that, like I said, with that kind of more platonic relationship. I didn't think there was anything romantic or super intimate or, well, quite honestly, physical and sexual between them. So, once again, I think if they had shown more, it might have ignited more fan rage. But once again, if you're going to just hint at it like that and put it in there just to do it, to be more edgy, but then not fully commit to it by actually showing us more of a real Batman-Batgirl sex scene, what was the point of it in the movie? Both for the the demonstration of the passion and for adding more into the story, for more stakes. And that's just what this movie feels like. This entire movie feels like something that could have been great, but because these people were afraid of having an R rating, they were held back. And the ironic thing is this. The scenes that they recreate from The Killing Joke, primarily Mark Hamill's adaptation, will make you grin, will make you shiver in fear, will make you depressed about your existence, and might even make you feel kind of sad for the Joker in some cases. It's possible you could have all these emotions. It is a dark, complicated, depressing, and kind of darkly humorous story in a lot of ways, depending on how you take it. But it's a fantastic story. It's one of the definitive Joker stories. It's one of the definitive Batman comics. It's one of the greatest comics ever written. I said it. And this movie kinda only half lives up to that. Both because of the lackluster animation, the flimsiness of the themes and expanding on them, holding back because of limited on the rating, and adding in things that feel like they're just part of another movie that would have served this plot better had they been added on even more, had they been expanded on further. Yeah, this whole movie just feels like something that was muted, that was held back, that is, like there's a fantastic movie within this shell, this underdeveloped embryo in an egg that just will never quite fully hatch. That's what this movie feels like. There are scenes that are so good, and those scenes that are from the comic that make you feel so unpleasant are executed so well, and that's the stuff that I was like, wow, this is great. But the combination of feeling dissatisfied with all the other aspects of the movie, and also the depressing nature of the stuff they do get right, it's not exactly the most pleasant experience. And don't get me wrong, I was sure that it was going to be disturbing and dark, and that's fine. I like that. But make a full-fledged better movie. And once again, it did make me realize that there might not have been enough there to have the full feature. And I'll say it again, if you're going to expand around it, actually expand enough around it that it fits within the context of the rest of your movie, the additional stuff, and the stuff that is the center of your adaptation. And I know I hold these guys to a high standard, and I had pretty high expectations. I kind of did. I thought that it might be one of those things where maybe other people might not like it, but I really would. And honestly, I just have mixed feelings. Like, would I watch it again? I mean, the thing about it is, it just feels like two movies that were kind of split in there. And I get the purpose of the first part, but there was enough of it there to justify it being there, much like a lot of the other stuff in this movie. It doesn't justify having a Killing Joke movie or an R-rated Killing Joke movie because they hold back so much in terms of writing and in terms of presentation. I mean, at least the animation could have been better. I mean, I don't know. But, wrapping it up, though, the center of the stuff, I can't say that it was a bad experience. I guess I think overall, because the presentation was still made by, Bruce Timm and his team at the DC animated universe, these guys are like the Pixar of adapting comic books. They really are, I mean, I guess some people might say Marvel, but for DC at least, no, these guys have done it better. Yes, yes, there is far more good writing in the DC animated universe than there is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think many people would agree with me on that, and it's pretty obvious because, the nature of the Marvel movies is they're made to create more Marvel movies, whereas the DC stuff just builds naturally with a lot of individual stories as well as ones that are connected over years and years, without completely blatantly building a money-making franchise. Okay. But to wrap it up, though, the voice acting was great, the direction was good, the music was really good, some of the animation was decent, adapting the main parts of the story were good, some of the stuff with Barbara was interesting and added a bit more, but like I said, there's just too many areas where this movie holds back, or it doesn't add enough, or it just adds the wrong stuff at the wrong time and incompletes things. It's like it was just an incomplete idea matched with an excuse to, bring something else to life, is what it feels like. And in all honesty, it is good, but I would recommend that you guys just go and read the actual comic book. Alright, everybody. Well, those are my thoughts on the Killing Joke movie. Let me know your comments below. What you guys think about it? Man, I liked it. It was good, and like I said, the stuff that they got right, the really depressing, crazy stuff, is true to life, with these writers and with these performers. But man, as good as it was disappointing. It was just kind of good or okay, but not great. Still better than Batman v Superman, though. All right, everybody. Merlin out. Stay magical.